Shalom, shalom. All praise to the Most High. Another day to get edified through the Spirit. The title of this lesson is going to be Love Your Enemies. So in the heat of all that's going on, I seen a couple brothers post about this specific interview with the family of Miss Ruth Whitfield, which was one of the victims that was in the shooting at the grocery store. I believe that's Brother Benjamin Crump to the right, which is at a lot of these atrocities, really. Nothing but another poverty pimp. But we're going to kind of listen to what the family had to say about the shooting, the massacre at the grocery store. Let's listen in, and then we're gonna dissect and go from there.
By someone that just full of hate for no reason, it's very hard for us to handle right now. We make no apologies for our suffering and our pain. You can see it. We're not going to apologize for that. But we're not just hurting. We're angry. We're mad. This shouldn't have happened. We do our best to be good citizens, to be good people. We believe in God. We trust Him. We treat people with decency. And we love even our enemies.
All right, so we're going to stop right there. I wanted to catch the last part of what he said. He said, we believe in God. We trust Him, right? We try to treat everybody right, and we love our enemies, okay? So, listening to that, it made me want to actually do a lesson on this, man, because I've been in a few debates with brothers from the so-called Christian realm, the Christian church, about love our enemies. And, it's a lot of misconception about that we should be, that verse that's spoken about in Matthew chapter 5 is about, loving the other nations and loving, loving the people that continually have their foot on our neck, man. Shout out to the brother Larry Johnson. I'm not sure if brothers follow him on Instagram. He did a pretty good breakdown on the symbolism of the shooting. We're not going to get into that, but we're going to, get started with the lesson. So I was telling my brother as well last week, that the so-called elite of the white, of the white people, so-called white people, they don't feel stuff like this, man. A lot of times they hire coon Negroes, such as Benjamin Crump, Al Sharpton. The list goes on and on to pimp out our people, right? Basically a taskmaster for the so-called white man, right? So there's a lot of Negroes out there that do that, but they do fear you separating yourself from the psychological control that they have on our people, right? They feel you coming back to the law, statutes, and commandments, your customs, your nationality, and being faithful to your power, your God, and keeping the faith in His Son, right? The Black Messiah, Yahushua. So we're going to go ahead and get started, with my favorite scripture, right? So like I said, it's a lot of misconception about what the Bible is referring to regarding love your enemies. So what we're going to do is we're going to dissect Matthew chapter 5, I believe, starting at verse 43, get a sense to our people, give everyone the biblical understanding to the best of my ability as the Spirit sees witness. So we're going to see, is the Bible referring to our oppressors, right? The ones who oppress us through their, through their policies, gentrification, who brutally raped our forefathers, right? The ones who have committed these mass atrocities and genocide on our people, that shoot our people down and sacrifice our people to their wicked deities. So let's find out. Psalms 94 and 16. Bring it out for me, please.
This is the book of Psalms, chapter 94, verse 16. Who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Or who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity?
So, man, this always my starting verse. It just it shoots chills up, up my bones, in my spirit, man, because we got to rise for the Most High, man. Truly seek out the understanding of the scriptures and stop cooning and being used and manipulated, by this society, man, right? So we mentioned taskmasters earlier. I believe that's what I got next, right? Our enemies since the beginning of time have always used coon Negroes of our people, also taskmasters, of their own people to keep our people in control, I should say. And a lot of our people sell out our people for different incentives, whether it's money, fame, whatever the situation may be, but we're going to prove that in the Bible. Let's start at Exodus chapter 1. And let's start right here, verse 8.
This is the book of Exodus, chapter 1 and verse 8. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph.
Read on.
And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we.
Right. So, the king knew that we were a mighty people, man. Right. And that we were growing. That's what the next verse is going to bring out. Read verse 10.
Verse 10. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land.
And so get them up out of the land. So this is right before Moses is born, right? So the Egyptians, which were the people that were ruling over us at this time, had to deal wisely with the children of Israel, basically strategically planning on how to deal with them so the Israelites wouldn't overthrow them, right? A lot of times we see these taskmasters were of our own nation. I believe that's verse. I believe it's in here. Nevertheless, they dealt wisely with the children of Israel, put people over them to keep them in check, right? So the reason that I brought this out is because we still have that going on today. The so-called white man put these entertainers, me and brothers talk about this often, but they put, because I know a specific brother talks about this a lot, but we respect people that got money. We see them as leaders, whether it's entertainers, actors, ball players or whatever. So the white man knows that. So he puts them up in front of us and they, basically strategically market a certain type of lifestyle for us and we follow them, right? So, the other nations from the ancient time use those same strategies, to basically keep our people in check. So I just want to bring that out to kind of relate biblically to that really quick. Now let's get on to the lesson.
Salat, were you looking for that next verse?
Yeah, I believe I was.
Yeah, just that next verse.
Yeah. Verse 11. Read that real quick.
Therefore, they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses.
I don't know how I looked over that, man, but I appreciate that. Yeah, Khan. So yeah, same thing in the ancient times, and they did that, man. They did that also. really throughout all of the children of Israel captivities, but the one I think that stick out the most to me was the Greek captivity during the time of the Maccabees, right? But we're gonna go ahead and move forward with the lesson. Same thing, you know, they had our people was selling out, you know what I'm saying, going against our people to appeal to the Greeks. But yeah, let's get on with the lesson. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17.
This is a book of Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 17. Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor and not suffer sin upon him.
Right. So your brother is your neighbor, you know. Read on.
Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself.
But thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So sometimes among your people, and we have this today, this is not foreign from anybody on the Zoom or anybody that's listening on after, you know, this has been recorded. Sometimes among your people, you may have quarrels or differences, you know. So basically, we cannot have hatred amongst our people. You know, we have civil laws on how to deal with one another, right? You know, we have to love our neighbor as ourselves, even if that neighbor has become an enemy or has extreme hatred for us, man. We got to still love them. So Christ was quoting some of this, you know, and we're going to see that as we move forward. Let's bring that out right there, Matthew chapter 5, verse 43.
This is the book of Matthew chapter 5 and verse 43. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy.
Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. Go ahead, read on.
Verse 44. But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you.
Right. So that was the same thing that Moses was basically saying in a nutshell. The same thing. You know, don't have any grudge against your people. Still love them, rebuke them, you know, showing us how our neighbor was our brother, right? Read on verse 45.
Verse 45, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust.
Right. So us loving our enemies and loving our brothers, you know, we're going to be like our Father, which is in heaven, man, right? Because at the end of the day, you know, we've done a lot of stuff against the Most High, man, that he continues to give us his grace and mercy. And we should do the same thing for our brother. Read on.
For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same?
Right. So again, man, let's backtrack. This is sweet Jesus, you know, saying that we have to love our enemies that we may be the children of our Father which is in heaven, right? Right. So again, I want to harp on that, man. Like the Most High gives us a lot of grace and mercy that we aren't deserving of, right? So we have to make sure we dealing with our brothers and our sisters like that as well. So let's deal with verse 46, man, right? It's stating that if you only love them that love you, right? This is what Christ is bringing out. What good does that do? Then Christ compared it to the publicans, saying that's what they do, right? So we're reading about an enemy right here. Let's get to breaking that down. In these verses, we're reading about an enemy. Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. That was said. He said that's what was said in the beginning. But I tell you, love them that want to persecute you, that despitefully use you, that hate you, right? So again, Christ is quoting Moses. You know, one thing we gotta realize is that whenever Christ spoke, he used precepts from the Old Testament, right? He never spoke his own belly, his own words, right? he always quoted things that had already been spoken on. He was the master of rightly dividing the word. All right, so we're gonna go to Exodus chapter 23, and let's deeply dive into this enemy thing to see, is this talking about how many different enemies are there in the Bible? That's one thing we need to ask ourselves. So I want y'all to have that on the front of y'all head as we're going through this. How many enemies are there? Right? So let's start here at Exodus chapter 23 and verse 4.
This is the book of Exodus chapter 23 and verse 5. Slot, verse 4. If thou meet thine enemy's ox or his ass going astray, thou shalt surely bring it back to him again.
Right. So if you meet your enemy's ox, the one who has hatred for you, or you are at odds with, or you meet his donkey going astray, you should bring it back, man. This is a commandment, right? You are commanded to do that, right? Read verse 5.
Verse 5. If thou see the ass of him that hateth thee lying under his burden, and wouldest forbear to help him, thou shalt surely help with him.
You are commanded to help him, man. Right. So what this going into, I know sometimes the KJV can be hard to read, right? So if you see the donkey of your enemy that hates your guts, man, right? Has pretty much collapsed and needs assistance, you are commanded to help them, right? So these are some of the civil laws concerning the nation of Israel, right? So we're going to precept this because this is also spoken about again in Deuteronomy chapter 22 and verse 1, and it's going to further get into detail about what was being spoken about in Exodus chapter 23. Let's bring that out right here. Deuteronomy chapter 22 and verse 1.
This is the book of Deuteronomy chapter 22 and verse 1. Thou shalt not see thy brother's ox or his sheep go astray, and hide thyself from them. Thou shalt in any case bring them again unto thy brother.
Right. So you shouldn't be off in you seeing your brother ox or sheep, and you out in the bushes trying to hide, so nobody don't see that you see what's going on. No, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to, get the ox or the sheep and bring them to your brother. That's his those are his cattle. They may have gotten out or whatever, you're supposed to bring them back to him. You know what I'm saying? I know that y'all might be at odds or a quarrel or anything like that, but, again, you should be bringing that back. Read verse 2.
Verse 2. And if thy brother be not nigh unto thee, or if thou know him not, then thou shalt bring it unto thine own house, and it shall be with thee until thy brother seek after it, and thou shalt restore it to him again.
You should restore it to him again. One thing I want to harp on right here is that what we just read in Exodus 23 again is further breaking this down, going into detail about your brother's ox or your brother's sheep, right? That has become your enemy, right? So that in Exodus 23, again, I'll make sure y'all hear me. That's referring to your brother that has become your enemy. Right? And know him not just basically means if you don't know him, but he's of your nation. Such as, he may be of another tribe or something like that, but you should bring it to your crib, right? And when your brother starts to seek it or look for it or whatever, you should, hey, I got it over here in my crib, brother. Come on over here and I'm make sure I return that to you. Right? Read on.
Verse 3. In like manner shalt thou do with his ass, and so shalt thou do with his raiment, and with all lost thing of thy brothers, which he hath lost, and thou hast found, shalt thou do likewise. Thou mayest not hide thyself.
Shoot, whatever it is, if your brother done lost some keys, whatever his belongings that he has, you don't need to steal it or hide it from him. I know y'all are at odds. Again, these are civil laws, right? for the nation of Israel, you should hold it down till he comes to look for it and then return it to him. That's the right thing to do. That's what the Most High is bringing out right here through Moses, man. You know, and I'm just thinking about, man, if we apply this today, wow, man, we about to get some more into it. But read verse 4.
Verse 4, thou shalt not see thy brother's ass or his ox fall down by the way, and hide thyself from them. Thou shalt surely help him to lift them up again.
Precept right there for Exodus 23, verse 5, right? Same thing it was going into, right? Let's go back and see. That's the same thing. Exodus chapter 23, verse 4. If thou meet thy enemy's ox or his ass going astray, thou shalt surely bring it back to him. Thou see the ass of him that hated thee lying under his burden, and wouldest forbid to help him, thou shalt surely help with him. Same thing. It's going into the same thing. So we found out that was going into thy brother, right? Thy brother. So we've discussed one type of enemy already, being your brother that you may have differences with, someone of your own nation, but you're still commanded to do right by him, right? You may be at odds, but you still should help him if need be when things come up, right? So we're about to go back to Exodus. Well, we already hear Exodus 23, and we're going to see another type of enemy. Exodus chapter 23, and verse 20.
This is the book of Exodus chapter 23 and verse 20. Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared.
Right. So again, this is referring to Hamashiach, right? Just prophecy, really. But read on.
Verse 21. Beware of him and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him.
Obey his voice, man, right? Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, your sins, right? For my name is in him. Read on.
Verse 22. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies, and an adversary unto thine adversaries.
But I will be an enemy unto thine enemies, and an adversary to thine adversaries. Interesting. Okay, read on.
Verse 23. For mine angel shall go before thee and bring thee in unto the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off.
So I'm making sure I'm tracking. These aren't the same enemies that just was spoken about in verse 4 and 5. These are the enemies of the other nations, specifically right here, the Hamite nations, right? So we see that we have two different set of enemies right here in this chapter. I will be an enemy unto thine enemies, or an adversary unto thine adversaries. So based on that alone, you know, we have to make sure that we have everything in context as far as, is this referring to when Christ spoke about in Matthew chapter 5, was he talking about enemies of our own people, or was he talking about enemies of the other nations? Let's see what we have. Let's get Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 48.
This is the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 48. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Most High shall send against thee, in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee.
So that happened to our people, man. You know, we had yokes of iron put upon our people's neck in slavery, man, right? By what this verse right here calls our enemies did that. So which, you know, are these the people that we should love and pray for, and and then we're having to want from them in all things, whether it's food, water, clothing, buying a house, getting a loan, getting a degree, a business license, a driver's license, you know what I'm saying? So on and so forth is, basically we're slaves in this society. Really? Are these the people that we should be loving that's persecuting us? Just something to think about. Let's get another one. Verse 68. All these are classics, man. Verse 68.
This is a book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, and verse 68. And the Most High shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you.
Right. So we did go into slavery on ships, right? And we were sold to our enemies, right? For slave man and slave woman, and no man shall redeem us, right? So again, this is definitely that second enemy, because we weren't sold unto our brothers, of our own people, right? These are that second set of enemies that was spoken about again, the other nations being our enemies, right? So we've established, we're just bringing out more and more that's showing that it's two different sets of enemies, right? We're gonna get more, because there's a lot throughout the scriptures that, to show the other nations as our enemies, and to show that we became enemies to each other. Let's get this, another classic, Psalms chapter 83. We're gonna read straight through, brother. Let's just read quickly through verse 8.
This is the book of Psalms, chapter 83, starting at verse 1. Keep not thou silence, O power. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O power. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee, the tabernacles of Edom, and the Ishmaelites of Moab, and the Hagarenes, Gabal, and Ammon, and Amalek, the Philistines, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assur also is joined with them. They have holpen the children of Lot. Salah.
Gone. The water, good brother. All right, so, our enemies have basically risen up against us, right? They that hate the Most High have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against our people. They have come and said, let us cut them off, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. Then it goes on to who this is referring to. This is the other nations, Edom, the Ishmaelites, Moab, so on and so forth. So the ones that hate God, that's what was brought out right here. Keep not thy silence, O God, and hold not thy peace, and be not still. Make your name reign in this earth again, right? Your enemies, not only the ones they're enemies to God, but they're enemies against the children of Israel as well. So again, that's just to show that they're different set of enemies. Again, one of your own people and one of the other nations, right? Let's get more. One of my favorites right here, man. You know what I'm saying? Just to really show how patient and loving and really sincere about the commandments David was, man. But we're gonna get a little bit. I don't want to get too much. All of this is good. I'm gonna try not to get too much. Y'all know me. I like to really read it, but Let's get this. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 5.
This is the book of 1 Samuel chapter 18 and verse 5. And David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war. And he was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants.
Man, they love David, man. They love David. David was a man of war. Read on.
Verse 6. And it came to pass as they came, when David was returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul, with tabrets, with joy, and with instruments of music.
Man, this pissed this pissed the king off, man. We're gonna get it and see, man. But you know, he was really pissed off about this. Read on.
And the women answered one another as they played, and said, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s.
So the women was singing, yeah, basically Saul has killed some men, but you know, David has killed more. You know, so you know, this pissed the king off, man. Read on.
10 times more.
10 times more. Right.
Come. Verse 8. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom?
So how can what else can he do more than me but take the kingdom over, man? Right? Let's read verse 9, and we're gonna break a little bit down before we read on.
And Saul eyed David from that day and forward.
Man, Saul had an evil eye toward David from that day forth, right? You know, but David did what he was commanded to do. You know, he was just a man of war, and the spirit of the Lord was dealing with him, which we're gonna read about. But one thing I want to address, which really confuses me a little bit, right? So David was killing tens of thousands, right? As we discussed and read in the scripture. And Saul was killing thousands of their enemies, which were the Philistines. So at this time, the children of Israel basically has enemies all around them. So I'm kind of confused as to why they weren't getting on their knees praying for their enemies, right? They wasn't getting on their knees and, you know, praying to the Most High. Just let these guys see us as good people, and let's love one another. And no, that's not what was going on, man. It's not. You know, so that's Christianity doctrine that just it isn't in the scriptures, man. They was praying. Go ahead.
They weren't singing "We Shall Overcome."
They wasn't marching. You know what I'm saying? They wasn't, you know, being lame, man, because that junk is whack. They weren't marching, picketing. You know what I'm saying? They weren't protesting. Black Lives Matter, Israelites. They weren't doing that, man. That's weak. They were praying to the Most High so that they can conquer these other nations. That's what they were doing. They wanted to rule over them. They wanted to be out of this the captivities that they were in. They weren't trying to assimilate. Well, they were, some of them were trying to assimilate, but for the most part, shoot, they were trying to get away from them. Let's read verse 10. Let's read on.
Verse 10. And it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from the Most High came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house. And David played with his hand, as at other times. And there was a javelin in Saul's hand.
Right. So a javelin is basically like a, correct me if I'm wrong, brothers, like a small knife, I believe.
It's a spear. I thought.
Yeah. Like a small spear knife. Shoot, they you know, basically the same thing. But nevertheless, what I wanted to bring out of this is that the Most High sent an evil spirit upon Saul, right? And it really, as I think about it, man, and this just came to me, it more than likely was to test David, to test his faith, right? Read verse 11.
Verse 11, and Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice.
Twice Saul tried to kill David with the javelin. He threw it at him and missed, right? Read on.
Verse 12, and Saul was afraid of David because the Most High was with him and was departed from Saul.
Right. So Saul started to be afraid of David because he knew the Most High was with him now. Read through verse 14 up.
Verse 13, therefore Saul removed him from him and made him his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Most High was with him.
Yeah, man, the Most High loved David, man. Most High loved David, man. So what I wanted to bring out real quick, we're going to read verse, let's read verse 29.
Verse 29, and Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually.
Right, man. Saul became David's enemy continually, man. So what I want to show us is, man, just based on what we read, all of this is part of the reason that Saul hated David. He hated David, man. Right? A lot of jealousy, what I'm saying, kind of from what I read out of that. But nevertheless, Saul was an Israelite from the tribe of Benjamin. David was an Israelite from the tribe of Judah. So they are brothers of the same nation, right? So we saw how David dealt with Saul. And if you haven't read 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, you should definitely go back and read that. Kings. Really, all of that is good information, man, that if you haven't read it, you don't understand the Bible. So nevertheless, those were brothers of the same nation, and they became enemies to one another, right? So Saul sought to kill David many times, as we read. And actually, David had the opportunity to kill Saul as well, but chose not to because that was his brother-in-law. And he really had a lot of respect for King Saul. He still, he actually really still showed love to King David. So right here, we saw the concept of love your enemy. And actually in the end, I ain't even get this, but David told Saul basically, why are you trying to kill me, man? Basically he had, and I'm paraphrasing, he had ample opportunities to kill him, but, in the end, Saul told him, you're a better man than me, in a nutshell. But if you hadn't read that, go back and read it. Really good, really good information. But we're going to continue on with the lesson. Let's get this right here, Micah chapter 2 and verse 8.
Slack, I thought I was off of mute. This is a book of Micah chapter 2 and verse 8. Even of late, my people is risen up as an enemy. Ye pull off the robe with the garment from them that pass by securely as men adverse from war.
Right, so the Most High said, my people has risen up as an enemy, right? So, not only have we become enemies to each other, but we have become enemies to the Most High God. If you don't follow walking in his ways, keeping the law, statutes, and commandments to the best of your ability, the faith in his son, you've risen up as an enemy to the Most High, right? Just thinking about it, man, we're more of an enemy to ourselves now. We're more because that's really how they manipulated us. We're more of an enemy to ourselves now than, these other nations are to us, from killing each other, taking advantage of our sisters taking advantage of brothers, manipulating brothers manipulating sisters, selling drugs to one another, covetous toward one another, all manner of evil toward one another, right? So, man, if we apply loving your enemy, we'll be miles ahead, of where we are right now, right? But let's get this right here, Proverbs chapter 25, in verse 21.
This is a book of Proverbs chapter 25 and verse 21. If thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat. And if he be thirsty, give him water to drink.
Wow, read on.
For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Most High shall reward thee.
So I know we went back and forth. We, went to the enemies of our own people, and we went to the enemies of the other nations, but we back to the enemies of our own people, man, right? Again, this right here, think of if we applied this as so-called blacks, Negroes, man. Where will we be as a nation if we applied this, man? Right? Then I like how this was phrased, shall heap coals of fire upon his head, right? Meaning that you're going to have him in deep thought, right? And possibly make him or her consider how they've been treating you and repent. And the Lord shall reward thee, man. You're going to have them like, man, why I've been such a a-hole to them and they still want to feed me. They give me water. I've been so wrong to them. Like, why are they treating me like this, man? All right. So they gonna be, they gonna be, they headspace gonna be all over the place, man. And like I said, man, Lord willing, they change and repent based on your good works, your actions, right? It's book of Romans chapter 11, verse 28.
This is a book of Romans chapter 11 and verse 28. As concerning the gospel, they are enemies for your sakes, but as touching the election, they are beloved for the Father's sakes.
Right. So this is going into, again, brother did an excellent lesson on the division between the southern and northern kingdom. But just wanted to bring this out again, just to show again that there are enemies amongst the children of Israel, which we've covered, right? And spoke about in the scriptures, and can throw you off if you're not serious about your scholarship and your studies, man. Also, if the Most High doesn't put his spirit on you, man. So we have enemies of our own people, but we are commanded to treat them right. We're commanded to treat them right. Pray for them. Pray that the Lord get the spirit off of them so that they can, see you as a brother. Right? This some, again, shoot, the lessons, and I'm sure brothers feel the same way, but the lessons I do be for me, because I got to do better in this area. You feel me? Not necessarily saying that I'm awful, but I definitely can improve. You feel me? I can do better about, praying for brothers, that I may, I'm really not at odds with anybody at my age, but, I still need to do better, a better job of, treating everybody right, with my own people, praying for one another, so on and so forth, right? But let's get an example right here with Paul. Bring this out, Acts chapter 26, verse 1.
This is the book of Acts chapter 26 and verse 1. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, thou art permitted to speak for thyself. Then Paul stretched forth the hand and answered for himself.
Okay, cool. All right, Paul, let me see what I want. Give me just a second. Oh yeah, let's bring this out on verse 9.
Verse 9, I verily thought with myself that I ought to do many things contrary to the name of Yahushua of Nazareth.
Yahushua the righteous. So Paul, man, yeah, let's read verse 10. Verse 10, and we'll break it down a little.
Verse 10, which thing I also did in Jerusalem, and many of the saints did I shut up in prison, having received authority from the chief priests. And when they were put to death, I gave my voice against them.
Read on.
And I punished them oft in every synagogue, and compelled them to blasphemy. And being exceedingly mad against them, I persecuted them even unto strange cities.
Even into strange city, man. So Paul was an enemy to Yahushua of Nazareth, the righteous, right? Before repenting. And of course, Yahushua opening his eyes to the true understanding. He was persecuting those that believed in Christ, man, right? Shutting them up in the prison by the authority of the chief priests, the Pharisees. You know, they were being put to death. He spoke against them, spoke against Yahushua, right? You know, so this was before Yahushua opened his eyes, well, blinded him, really, but spiritually opened his eyes to, you know, to the work that he had been called to do, right? Let me see what I want right here. Romans chapter 5, and verse 8.
This is the book of Romans chapter 5 and verse 8. But the Most High commended his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Hamashiach died for us.
He died for us, man. So we've really been enemies to the Most High and to Christ while in the world, man. Right? But he's called us to be an ally. You know what I'm saying? He's called us to walk with him and to push his message to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, to open up the eyes of his people. He's using us as a vessel, man, right? So we're trying to come from being an enemy to an ally, right? Verse 9.
Verse 9, much more then, being now justified by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him.
Through him. You know what I'm saying? That's the only way, if we are fortunate enough to be saved, is through Yahushua, right? Because, you know, we deserve to not be saved. I know I do, right? Verse 10.
Verse 10, for if when we were enemies, we were reconciled to the Most High by the death of his Son, much more, being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life.
By his life, man, right? That ultimate sacrifice he made for us, right? Read the next verse for me.
Verse 11, and not only so, but we also joy in the Most High through our Lord Hamashiach Yahushua, by whom we have now received the atonement.
We have received the atonement, man. This whole chapter 5 is beautiful, man. But we're not gonna get all of it, but you know, I just wanted to show, man, you know, it's all referring to the enemies. You know, that Matthew chapter 5 is referring to the enemies of your own people, right? That you have a problem with. Okay. So it isn't referring to these other nations. It's not referring to the so-called white man that you can't see a life without, you know, the so-called elites that oppress you, you know, that are confederate against the Most High God, and that they have had you in hard bondage, man. That's not what it's referring to, man. Right? Read Romans chapter 9, verse 13.
This is the book of Romans chapter 9, verse 13. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated.
But Esau have I hated. So it's the Most High saying that he hates Esau. And this is just an example, but he's telling you to love him. He's telling you to love the Edomites. No, it just doesn't make sense, man. You know, or maybe you don't have an understanding of what Christ was really going into. It may be something to think about. Maybe you need to, you know, study more, you know, seek more, you know, and Lord willing, he'll put his spirit on you to get that understanding. Let's get Matthew chapter 22 and verse 29.
This is the book of Matthew chapter 22 and verse 29. Yahushua answered and said unto them, ye do err, not knowing the scriptures, nor the power of the Most High.
So you in error, you're jammed up. You need to stop teaching and get back to the first oracles of God, man. Right? It's spoken of in Hebrews. Right? So, you know, we all gotta, you know, be serious about our scholarship, right? Because that's not what Matthew chapter 5 is referring to. Let's get this right here in Matthew chapter 12 and verse 30.
This is a book of Matthew chapter 12 and verse 30. He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathered not with me scattereth abroad.
So he that is not with me is against me, right? So those who are spewing information contrary to the gospel of Christ is against him, right? Or an enemy to him, whether it be of your own nation or another nation, right? If you spew that the laws of God are done away with, you are an enemy against God. You're an enemy against Christ, right? If you spew that the Bible is a book of inclusion to all nations, you are an enemy to the Most High God and Yahushua the righteous. But we can go on, but you must be speaking the oracles of God, you know, of course, which is spoken of in, I believe, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 11.
So, all right, do we have Colossians 1 and 21?
I don't. Let me get that real quick up.
Just to go with the point you were just saying about if you're not speaking the oracles, you're an enemy.
Let's bring it out real quick.
This is a book of Colossians chapter 1 and verse 21. And you that were sometime alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now hath he reconciled.
Yet now hath he reconciled, man. So that's excellent precept right there, man. We were enemies to the Most High and to Christ by being wise in our own conceit and being of the world, man, right? But all praise to the Most High that through his favor and his grace and mercy, that he has reconciled us and bid us, bid us back to the marriage. Hopefully we don't backtrack, you know, and we continue to push forward, man. I had one more verse that I wanted to bring out real quick to go along with the lesson. Just to show, you know, brother did an excellent breakdown on this, just to show the division between the southern and northern kingdom, them being brothers and the Most High stepping in. Let's bring this out. 1 Kings chapter 12 and verse 21.
This is a book of 1 Kings chapter 12 and verse 21. And when Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah with the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 chosen men, which were warriors, to fight against the house of Israel, to bring the kingdom again to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon.
Right. So long story short, Rehoboam was Solomon's son, and Jeroboam. Jeroboam was over the northern kingdom, you know, pretty much. And there was a split because, in a nutshell, man, I would go back and read it, but in a nutshell, they came together and assembled and basically stated that the king was too hard on them, you know, so they wanted less punishment and Rehoboam. I mean, less things to be not as intense. And Rehoboam wasn't having it. He trying to turn up the heat. So the kingdom split. Jeroboam, who was Solomon's servant, went and the Most High granted him the northern kingdom, and Judah, Benjamin, the southern kingdom was with Rehoboam. But let's read on. Go back and read that, because I know I summarized it, but it doesn't do any justice. If you haven't read it for yourself, please go back and read it. Let's read on verse 22.
Verse 22, but the word of the Most High came unto Shemaiah, the man of the Most High, saying,
Read on.
speak unto Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all the house of Judah and Benjamin, and to the remnant of the people, saying.
All right, so what's about to happen is that what was about to happen is that, again, Rehoboam was assembling his men, right, to go fight against the children, their brothers, the northern kingdom, right, because they wanted the kingdom to be back to everybody to be under rulership under Rehoboam, right? Let's see what the Lord got to say. Verse 24.
Verse 24, thus saith the Most High, ye shall not go up, nor fight against your brethren, the children of Israel. Return every man to his house, for this thing is from me. They hearken therefore to the word of the Most High, and return to depart according to the word of the Most High.
Right, so the Lord commanded them, man, do not go up and fight against the children of Israel. Those are your brothers, man. Y'all need to stand down on that. You shouldn't, they listened, all praises, and they went back to the crib. Right? So in a nutshell, man, that was love your enemies. Hopefully you guys were edified through the spirit. Again, there's two different type of enemies. And you need to make sure that that you're dealing with the right enemy right here in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 44. Bring that out one more time, Mark.
I was going to suggest the same. This is the book of Matthew chapter 5 and verse 44. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you.
Read verse 45 as well.
Verse 45, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust.
Right. Read verse 46.
Verse 46, for if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same?
That's right. So, man, if you only love them that love you, I mean, what good is that, man? So this is referring to your brothers, man, right? Because as we read, we had so much division and confusion and quarrels between our nation, that we had to be taught how to love one another. We gotta make this ring again in the earth, man. Love your enemies of your own people, man. Learn how to love your people. Still love them. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, man. And pray for them, right? That despitefully use you and persecute you. So we got to pray that spirit off our people, man, and do right by them so that, Lord willing, they will see the light in you and you'll be able to shine your light in a dark place, and they repent and come back to this word. And with that, I yield.